So my first question to you both is, what unique quantum communication application can actually be realized in space that are impossible on Earth?
Well, maybe not impossible, but I think so. I think we'll come to the internet later, but let's talk about what's practical at the minute, which is trusted node QKD. And so we've got demonstrations in fiber of trusted node QKD in various places in the UK and in other countries elsewhere in the world. If you want to go from country to country, you can probably go through a bit of fiber that's underwater for a while, maybe 100 kilometers more, as long as there's no amplification built in. But if you want to go from here to the US, you are not going to have quantum communications on undersea fiber at this point in time. So I think at the minute, I would see distance as one significant advantage. If we want to do, at the moment, trusted node QKD on a global scale, then I think we've got to have satellites operating as additional trusted nodes in order to get us from country to country, if you like. I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the way that we see our space systems is that they can augment the emerging capability on the ground. I think that the distance problem is kind of captured by the ability to access different regions when you're in low Earth orbit. It means that you're able to provide global coverage. That provides some scalability when you're looking at business plans to deploy these systems.
Talking about the lower orbit satellite, we all know that Elon Musk has got this really exciting, constellation of Starlink by, creating this kind of global internet, coverage to support some of the most remote, like locations in the world. So do you think quantum-related technology can play a role to even complement or expand that kind of, connectivity on global scale?
Well, Peter Knight encouraged us this morning not to have lots of hype. So be very clear, quantum communications isn't going to provide faster communications than conventional communication. At the minute, trusted node QKD provides security in exchanging keys, but it doesn't provide major enhancement of data rate or anything like that. So there's no sense that quantum communication is going to compete with Elon Musk in terms of data rate. However, it can provide some additional security by distributing keys here, there, and everywhere that can then be used. And I think that's particularly important when you're talking about areas that maybe don't have fiber networks readily available on the ground or very immature fiber networks.
And I think as well we can leverage the advantages of companies like Starlink, who have demonstrated the ability to deploy multiple satellites simultaneously at low cost. And so as we see optical as a communication standard emerging in space, which is very much a live topic, then seeing kind of quantum enabled and quantum layers within that optical system, I think will be part of the next kind of few years of development. And from that, then we'll see rollout of more and more optical ground stations, and that will lead the way towards more quantum-enabled nodes on the ground as well.
I mean, at the moment, I think it's fair to say that quantum stuff in space is in its infancy. So, there have been one or two demonstration missions already. For those of you that haven't seen the model sitting near the registration desk, we have a small CubeSat about this big, the real version of which is going to be launched next year. And we're just seeking to do a demonstration that you can do QKD from a box about this big that's in low Earth orbit down to a ground station. If you can do that, then you can start to develop ideas about how that can progress to a greater number of satellites and what you would need for wider coverage. But at the minute, we're at the technology demonstration level, I think.
I would agree. Technology demonstration and some initial demonstrations of how services might look as concepts. So where our satellite kind of fits into the picture is around operational demonstration and learning how we might want to operate these types of systems, how that fits into existing networks, how we interface to partners on the ground such as BT. All of this learning will help to establish what the technology baseline should be, which will then feed into kind of the next stage of development, in my view. Yeah.
That sounds really interesting. So when we're talking about building a really robust content internet, will require a network of content communication satellites. So what are the challenges of scaling those constellations and maintaining their coherence?
I think we won't know the full extent of all of those challenges until we get these first demonstrators up. We have inklings of the complexity. So for us, some of the challenges right now around beam steering, how you steer a laser system when your satellite is moving at 7 kilometers a second to a ground segment is a challenge. Making the systems which have worked well in the lab robust to the space environment, again, a huge challenge. How to bring teams of engineers who typically work in space but don't really speak the language of quantum into a room with quantum physicists and get those guys kind of talking about a common language. These are the challenges that we're facing now. I think that we see in the future the potential and the possibility of how we can move from doing weak coherent pulsed QKD to entanglement experimentations as we are doing on this mission through to entanglement distribution and the benefits that might bring. But we can't say that we're there yet. And I'm not sure that you would say the same for your mission.
Absolutely not. I mean, at the minute, we're trying to do trusted node QKD. So we have one ground station in the UK. We hope our satellite can talk to that. In principle, if that works, we hope to be able to point the satellite at some other ground station somewhere else. But you have to trust the satellite. And at the minute, you're just doing simple key exchange. Steve's already mentioned entanglement. That is the next leap forward. And there's an awful lot of technology developed. So people can now distribute entanglement on the ground, down fibers over reasonable distances. The memories are still not great, I would say, to even store entanglement on the ground. So when you're talking about doing that up in space, I think the technologies have to improve before we can stick them on satellites. But ultimately, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the quantum internet in a minute, if we want to go in that direction, then I think the technologies have to improve on the ground before we can start realistically putting them on satellite, particularly memories and things like that. If you want to keep stuff coherent for long enough for the satellite to fly somewhere else and then do something else, then I think you're talking about timescales that are very challenging for memories. So people have got to work on that. Once all that's done, people have already thought theoretically about how you might lay out a whole network of satellites that could potentially talk to each other as well as on the ground. But at the minute, those are theoretical studies because we've got to assess the capabilities with real experiments, I think.
So how many years do you think will be a realistic, timeline for us to achieve this kind of content internet?
I think that is a question beyond space. And so, let's get some... People talk about the quantum internet. I think some very limited kind of quantum internet behavior on the ground using fiber for some specific purpose is a first step. And even that is not about to happen. People have done some nice demonstration laboratory experiments now. But, that's on the ground and under relatively straightforward control with fiber. Doing that, including a space link, I think is going to take many years. We're not close to that yet. I mean, I'm a quantum guy, not a space guy, and I've learned a bit about space by the Hub mission. And so I've learned that anything to do with space takes at least twice as long as you first think and costs twice as much. So whatever any of us say, double both of those numbers before you have a realistic estimate.
And as a space guy, I would say the same about the quantum.
Yeah, I think that's true as well. That's fair enough. But
So does that mean maybe we should put a business proposal to Elon Musk and ask him to explore the possibility of quantum internet combined with his experiments, with Starlink in the years to come? So maybe the whole thing will fast track a little bit more.
I think if you want it to really speed up, it's going to take that kind of private investment or private company leap. I mean, there will be a plan. Peter Knight told us about these 10-year quantum missions for the UK, and you can see where quantum networking is going to try and evolve in that. If you want to accelerate beyond that 10-year time frame, then it's going to need someone to come in and make a big investment. We heard from Jeremy O'Brien yesterday about the massive investment the Australian government's chosen to put into PsiQuantum to get them to build that computer. If you want to have a real jump, then somebody's going to have to put up very large amounts of money in a short period of time. Otherwise, if it runs at the usual R&D investment pace, then we're talking at least 10 years before we see, quantum networking, including, I would argue, an entangled link that is a reliable entangled link to space. So maybe Elon Musk can speed that up, but I don't think UK Gov will.
How much are we talking about? Give me a figure, because we have lots of investors in the room.
I have no idea, but I think it'll be more than a factor of 2 if we were to guess. So, I mean, the UK national programme is going to put in apparently 2.5 billion over, and let's assume that a decent chunk of that goes to quantum networking. Well, if you want to do anything faster, you're going to have to take that money and compress it into a massive injection in a short period of time.
So I guess you could look at the Space Development Agency in the US and the amount that's being invested in classical optical communications for space. And that's around 4 billion, the budget there, to get to the point that the classical optical is working. Yeah. So then you're talking about investment on top of that. But I do think that the way that we're approaching it in the UK with smaller satellites, lower cost systems, because the technology is evolving so fast that we can get these systems into a cadence where we can prove a piece of technology, iterate, and then keep going. That should enable us to take faster steps. As a space guy, knowing all the promises that we can make, I believe that that's the right way forward, rather than trying to think of what the full endpoint can be, and then trying to set up a program, because we've seen problems with that within things like the European Space Agency's IRIS², and kind of getting buy-in from investors for the whole scheme. That's a real challenge. So taking this iterative approach means that we can talk to investors and we can find these nearer term kind of commercial opportunities that sit alongside the longer term visions.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think small satellites and learning some more is very important. I was in a session earlier where there's the kind of the physicists or the fundamental scientists basically say, well, it's just engineering now. And I would argue that with quantum stuff up in space, it's not just engineering. There are some fundamental things to still address. If we're going to put memories up there, I don't think we know what sort, and it's just a matter of improving those. I think there are still more fundamental questions to worry about, and then you can start to progress to say it's just an engineering problem after that.
Wonderful. We have about 1 minute. I really want to open up for Q&A from the audience. So do we have any audience who would like to put forward some questions to our distinguished expert here? You can use Slido or just raise your hands over there.
Yeah, just in terms of the previous session as well, energy transition, do you see that angle to this as well, that doing it through space could help us with the decarbonization of the internet working and reduce power consumption and so on?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there is an obvious advantage to space gives you the global reach. So if that can be turned to that advantage, then yes. But I think the most important thing about space it'll give us worldwide connections.
you could look at it in terms of kind of the energy cost of base stations in comparison to a satellite. And yes, you need to expend a lot of energy to get that satellite up, but once it's up, it's using solar panels, and so the energy that it's creating is green. You need to really trade off the whole system in that sense. So the costs that need to go into the development of launch vehicles. I think Elon's just launched another attempt at spaceship today, which was successful. So we're getting there in terms of kind of the economies of launching large amounts of mass efficiently, which also means in more sustainably. So I would say the future, if more communications, not just quantum, can be done from space, then there will be some green angle to it. Whether or not that should be the full motivation for doing it, I'm not so convinced yet.
Cool, thank you. We are actually running short on time, but maybe very quick question.
Okay. What do you both need to get a testbed in space? Who in the audience can help you, and what are you looking for?
Oh, that's quite a long list. What I would like to see is we've got some small satellites going up on the short time scale. I would like to see the UK start planning now to put up a larger quantum satellite. And I wouldn't be greedy. I wouldn't say it should be just quantum communications. It should have other quantum tech on it, you know, sensing and imaging and some more fundamental experiments. So I think the planning needs to start now, because that won't be launched for 10 years, even if the discussions start right now. So I think that's the important thing. Get talking about what happens next.
And for me as a business, then patient investors, which we have, and we're very grateful for. But that will always be a key part of it, access to capital. Yeah.
Wonderful. Unfortunately, we are running very short on time. So let's put our hands together for both Tim and Steve for such wonderful contribution.
Thank you.